So today I'm going to talk to you about how to pay for college, how to apply for free money, so grants and scholarships here. We're going to go over the types of financial aid that are available overall, eligibility, so who can get those types of financial aid, how much financial aid students can get, how to apply for that aid, and what happens after you've applied for aid. And then of course, I'll give you guys some time to ask questions at the end. Do feel free to ask any questions during the presentation as well through the chat. I also have some polls that I'm going to be asking as well. So please participate in those so we can see what you already know. So the types of financial aid overall are grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. Grants are the most prominent type of financial aid that students usually want to apply for because it's just free money. It's money that you don't have to earn and you don't have to pay it back. Scholarships are free or earned money, so they can be based on merit. They can be based on just where you attended high school, where you're attending college. It can be based on a lot of different things. So either it's free and you don't pay it back, or you earn it and you don't pay it back. There's also work study. Work study is earned money. This is the one that a lot of students don't think about when they're applying for financial aid. What it is a way of earning a regular paycheck from your school and from the government through a work study grant. And you get paid hourly just like you would with any other job. Most of the time you would be working on campus for work study. And then loans. This is what I'm not going to talk much about today because those should be your last resort. Hopefully, if you apply for all the other three types of aid, you won't need loans. So when it comes to financial aid eligibility, there's a difference between the federal guidelines and then the guidelines for other types of financial aid. So the federal guidelines are the guidelines you have to meet in order to file a FAFSA. So this, for the FAFSA, you have to be a citizen or permanent resident or have another eligible non-citizenship status. You have to have a high school diploma, GED, or pass a federally recognized high school exam. Or you can, and you have to be degree seeking, which just means that you're trying to get a certificate, associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree. With that, most schools are going to ask you to pick a degree when you apply for college. It's important to do that. There is a status called degree seeking undeclared, in which case the student doesn't necessarily know what they want to do yet, but they do want to be degree seeking eventually. That usually lasts for 2 semesters, depending on the school that you're going to, and then it will revert you back to non-degree seeking. So just be aware that if you're looking to receive any federal aid, you do have to be degree seeking. So don't choose non-degree transfer or anything like that. And then you have to maintain satisfactory academic progress. What that means is once you've received some aid and you want to continue to receive it, you have to maintain a 2.0 GPA. You have to keep a 67% completion rate. So 2 out of every 3 classes you attempt, you have to finish all the way. And getting an F does count as not completing the class. And then you have to finish your degree within 150% of the units that it takes to get that degree. So for example, a normal associate's degree takes 60 credits to receive. You would have some wiggle room with that. You would have 90 credits worth of classes that you could take before you would become ineligible for financial aid while pursuing an associate's degree. So when it comes to other financial aid, those guidelines are going to vary quite a bit. Private institutions are all going to have their own criteria. For example, some scholarship institutions are going to ask you to have a 3.0, while others will simply ask for a 2.0. So it really just depends. Our college has a 2.0 GPA and 6 or more credits in order to get scholarships at TMCC. And some colleges will ask you to fill out a CSS profile in order to get your scholarships at their school. Some will have a GPA requirement. They may have credit requirements for loans, or they may require you to make a scholarship applicant profile. So it really depends on the school you're going to. And then in Nevada, there's different kinds of state aid, and in most states as well, but those are going to vary by item, not by the whole state as a whole. So to go over how much federal student aid a student can get, it's very important to check each school's cost of attendance, because the government does not allow students to get more money in financial aid than it costs them to go to school. And the cost of attendance is always going to include 5 standard categories, and those are tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and board, personal miscellaneous, and transportation. So no matter what school you go to, you will have all of those things built into the cost of attending that school. The only ones that actually come out of your pocket and go directly to the school are the tuition and fees and books and supplies typically. If you're living on campus, then your room and board are going to go directly to the school as well. So with that, it's important to look at what categories are going to go directly to the school, because if you're living with your parents, maybe you won't have any room and board, although it will be in your cost of attendance, you won't actually have to pay that amount. So when you compare colleges, make sure that you're looking at what you're actually going to need to pay. Then there is the estimated family contribution. And the estimated family contribution is a number that the government uses to say how much they think a family can pay towards their students' fees. When you think of that number, it's important to know that you can still get that money in financial aid. It just can't be need-based. So you don't have to actually pay that money out of pocket. So with that, we're going to go ahead and launch a poll. So you guys can tell me what you already know here. So I'll give you roughly 15 to 20 seconds to go ahead and answer that poll. The question is, or the statement is, my parents make too much money, so I won't get financial aid. Is that a fact, a myth, or it depends? Looks like about 9 out of 15 people have filled that out there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'll share the results with you all. So it looks like nobody said that that was a fact, so I'm very glad to hear that. 5 out of 12 people said it was a myth, and 7 out of 12 people said it depends. So from a financial aid administrator perspective, that would be a myth. The reason being that students can get scholarships, they can get non-need-based aid. For example, here at TMCC, we have some grants that we put a certain percentage away for students who particularly don't have any need. So that overall cost of attendance, all those 5 categories, minus that estimated family contribution that you get from the FAFSA, that is your need. So students who either their EFC is far above the cost of attendance, so they don't have any need, they can still get aid in scholarships or non-need grants or student loans, but we don't want to do that. So grants are, like I said, the most important type of aid to apply for because it only requires an application. It doesn't require you to do a lot of jumping through hoops or writing essays or anything like that, and you don't have to pay it back. So the Pell Grant is something that requires the FAFSA. It is need-based, so those who have a higher EFC, usually around the 5,000 to 6,000 mark, are not going to get the Pell Grant in most cases. But if you are eligible, you can get up to $6,495 simply by filling out the FAFSA and being degree seeking and taking 12 credits or more. If you take fewer than 12 credits, then the amount that you're eligible for does get prorated down based on 4 levels of aid. So 12 or more credits is considered full-time, 9 credits to 11 credits is considered 3/4 time, 6 to 8 is half time, and anything under 6 is less than half time. So there are various levels of that grant. The Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, or FSEOG, is a grant that also comes from filling out the FAFSA. That one does have limited funds though, whereas the Pell Grant does not. So with that one, it usually is given to students who have exceptional needs. So their difference between their cost of attendance and their EFC is bigger. The Silver State Opportunity Grant, or SSOG, is given to students who are taking 15 or more credits and they enter their school at a college level in math and English. So they can get up to $5,500 per year. Again, that is based off of their need. But if a student has a higher need than is eligible for the Pell Grant, they can still get the Silver State Opportunity Grant because the EFC cutoff for that grant is higher. It's $8,500. And then institutional grants may or may not require the FAFSA. It really depends on the institution. So if they require a CSS profile, they may not require you to do the FAFSA in order to get grants. Whereas at TMCC, we do not use the CSS profile, so we do require the FAFSA when we award grants here. And mainly that's to know if we're going to give a student a need grant or a non-need grant. So when it comes to work study, the FAFSA does have to be completed each year in order to get the work study. And you have to select that you want work study on your FAFSA. You have to take 6 credits per semester, and you have to maintain satisfactory academic progress. If you can do those things, you can have the perks of a work study job, which are working very few nights and weekends, less travel, so less transportation costs. Usually you're working on campus, you can pop into class, pop into work, pop back into class, pop back into work, all without having to leave campus. And then they usually have a very flexible schedule because they understand that you're a student. So you're gonna be having class, you're going to be having homework, so they understand and they usually work with you when you have exams, etc. And they cannot legally ask you to work while you're supposed to be in class, whereas private employers, they can ask you to work whenever they see fit. So that is another perk. And then most colleges offer professional development opportunities for their work-study students. So before we go into scholarships, since we've talked about the things that require the FAFSA application, I have another poll for you. All right, so I can't complete a FAFSA because my parents don't have a social security number. Is that a fact, a myth, or it depends? All right, I'll give you a couple more seconds to answer here. All right. So it looks like 2 people said it was a fact, 8 people said it was a myth, and 1 said it depends. So with that one, it is a myth and it depends, I guess, as well. So if a student doesn't have a social security number, they could still be eligible to fill out the FAFSA as long as they're an eligible non-citizen with an alien registration number. But if the student's parents don't have a social security number, they can definitely still fill out the FAFSA, because you would just put all zeros in for the social security number, and you would sign with a paper signature page rather than signing with an FSA ID, which is a username and password that's created specifically for the student aid website. All right, so now we're going to hop into scholarships. The Nevada Promise Scholarship is available at all Nevada System of Higher Education community colleges. It's a last dollar scholarship. Each school that accepts it has a web page for it, and you would apply for the scholarship online. When I say it's a last dollar scholarship, what that means is your tuition and fees are going to be paid as long as you still have a remaining balance after your gift aid has been applied. So for example, if a student has the Pell Grant and they have the Federal Supplemental Opportunity Grant, those would be applied to the tuition and fees first, and any remaining cost would be paid by Nevada Promise. It doesn't include any fees that are not mandatory for all students. So if it's a special lab fee or anything like that, it is not covered. Millennium Scholarship is also one of the pieces of financial aid that counts before the Nevada Promise. The Millennium Scholarship pays $40 at community colleges, $60 at universities, and $80 at state schools per credit for up to 15 credits. So at TMCC, if you're working on an associate's degree, you can get up to $600 worth of Millennium Scholarship. And then the tribal scholarships, those who are Native American can usually apply through their tribe or nation for scholarships or grants. And they usually have their own application to apply for. And it usually requires that you have filled out your FAFSA already before you can apply through your tribe or nation. And then institutional scholarships. Like I said before, all institutions typically have a scholarship application that you can fill out, or they have scholarships that they just award when you apply to the school. So it's going to vary on how much you can get from your institution and what the requirements will be. However, there are also external scholarships. And what that means is just any scholarship that comes from a place outside of your school. And you can get so much money from that. Just to tell you an example, our cost of attendance here at TMCC for a student that lives with their parents is typically around $12,000 for the entire year, including those 5 categories that I've talked to you about. I've had students who have so many scholarships that they go above and beyond that cost of attendance, and I have to actually send money back to the donors and ask them to save it for the student for a later year or semester. So please, please, please always apply for scholarships because you can really get so much money from them. So it says, how do I apply? Do the FAFSA first. Before anything else, you want to do the FAFSA. So I have another poll for you here. And this one is, what does the FAFSA stand for? The first person who answers every time has been correct on every question. I don't know who you are, but you're quick. All right, we have about 10 out of 16 people who answered. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay. So I'll share the results here. So this, for the first time, the majority did not get this one correct. 7 people said federal application for free student aid, and 5 people said free application for federal student aid. So I know those are just very similar answers and only 2 words are swapped, but the answer that is correct is free application for federal student aid. And I always like to tell people to realize that free comes first, so never pay someone to help you with your FAFSA. If you need help with it, your school's financial aid office should be able to help you. Here at TMCC, we help through Zoom, we help on the phone, we help in person. So you should never have to pay for any assistance for that free application for federal student aid. Another, I'll have another poll question for you here in a second, but the first step to filling out the FAFSA is to create an FSA ID. Like I said for a little bit earlier, it is a username and password that allows you to access studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov is where the FAFSA is housed along with other parts of the federal student aid options. So an FSA ID does need to be created by one parent and the student, and they each have to have separate emails and separate phone numbers associated with the FSA ID. So you can't sign up for your student's FSA ID and for the parent FSA ID with the same email or the same phone number. You don't need an email and a phone number for it, but you do need one or the other. And you need a social security number to file for an FSA ID. So if you are a parent who does not have a social or if you are a student who does not have a social, you just would have to sign the FAFSA using a signature page instead. So here's another poll for you. This poll says, I'm over 18 and don't live with my parents. I don't need their signature or their information on the FAFSA. All right, I'll give a couple more seconds. All right, so it looks like most people got that one correct as well. It depends. So on the FAFSA application, there's a list of questions called the dependency status questions. And if those are answered all no, then the student does have to have their parent information on the FAFSA, regardless of whether they live with their parents or not, and regardless of whether they're over 18 or not. And that will remain true all the way until the student is 24 before January 1st of the year they're filing that FAFSA. So on the FAFSA, it'll ask you if you turned 24 before January 1st of a certain date, and that will determine also your dependency status. So most students, when they're graduating high school, do have to have their parents' information on the FAFSA. And another thing to pay attention to is the reason that that depends. The most common reason that a student wouldn't need their parents' information on their FAFSA between the age of 18 and 24 is if they have children of their own that they financially support, or that they have served active duty in the military and they're a veteran, or if they are at risk of homelessness, those types of things. So you do have to answer those dependency questions to find out if you are dependent or independent. So when you go to complete the FAFSA, this is going to be the biggest step in getting free money for college, just because most places are going to ask for it. You need your 2020 tax documents if you filed, and that'll be the 1040, W-2s for married people, and any schedules that you filed along with your taxes. A lot of people don't even know if they filed schedules with their 1040. So a lot of times I just tell students to bring your whole packet and bring your parent, and we will figure it out together. The questions on the FAFSA actually tell you where to get the information on the taxes. So for example, for adjusted gross income, it'll tell you to look at line 7 of your 1040. So things like that. And if you have any trouble doing it, they do have a new virtual assistant where you can ask questions and it'll give you answers in real time. Or you can call your school's financial aid office and they should be able to help you. So once you've filled out the FAFSA, the next thing to do is to apply for scholarships. So when you apply for scholarships, I usually recommend to students that you prepare first and then start applying. And when I say prepare, that means to collect your student aid report, which is a summary of your FAFSA that comes back to you. once you have filled it out and completed everything. And then to get letters of recommendation. With the letters of recommendation, it's really important to give the person you're asking enough notice to get those letters prepared for you. You can start asking for those now because the scholarship window is typically between October and March for the following school year. So while you're a senior in high school, you should be applying for as many scholarships as possible. Letters of recommendation can come from people who have just seen you do good deeds. They can come from school counselors. They can come from teachers. From pretty much anybody who has seen you do something outstanding in your life. And then references. There are some scholarships that will ask you for references, so have a couple available. Your high school transcripts may be requested as well. And then a lot of scholarships that award larger amounts do ask for essays. So it's good to create one deep personal essay about yourself. And then that way you can tailor it to different scholarship questions based off of that knowledge that you've already put together about yourself. It makes it easier to go ahead and apply for scholarships in a more timely fashion. And then an activity resume. And what I mean by that is just a list of dates and times that you were involved in community service or involved in sports or involved with your church or anything where you're trying to either personally improve or help improve your community. And then organize. Be organized. Make sure that you organize your scholarships based on the deadline so you don't miss any of those. There are even apps that help organize scholarships, which is really cool because you can even get reminders and notifications that your scholarship is due in a week. That way you can get it all prepared and sent in. The two things that I stress the most when it comes to applying for scholarships are read the criteria and follow the instructions. So when I say read the criteria, that just means, does it require a 2.5 GPA and 3 letters of recommendation and your SAR report? Don't submit it without all 3 of those things. And when I say follow the instructions, that means if they ask you for a 500-word essay, make sure it's 500 words, because if it's too short, it'll get tossed. If it goes over, it'll get tossed. A lot of scholarship donors that I've met with have told me that the main reason they don't award scholarships to some students is because they don't complete the application in its entirety. So they're not meeting that criteria or following those instructions. So when you're looking for scholarships to apply for, there are so many different types. There are scholarships for people who are athletic or have played sports. There are specific to each college. There are ones that are sponsored by companies. There are ones that are based on merit, so how well you do in school. There are ones for minorities. There are weird ones. For example, duct tape. They have a competition where people make a prom dress out of duct tape and they wear it to prom and take pictures, and the best one wins multiple thousands of dollars. There's a zombie apocalypse scholarship where you write about the zombie apocalypse. Almost anything you can think of, there's a scholarship for it. There are scholarship contests or sweepstakes. So they draw a number, and if your application is that number, then they give you money. There's scholarships based off of your major. If you're going into nursing or going into computer science, anything, there are scholarships for you. States have their own scholarships. So Nevada has its own scholarship website for students who graduate from high school in Nevada. And then there are scholarships for students who are applying during high school and scholarships just for undergraduates and anything in between. So where to apply for scholarships? You want to always apply to your college in particular. For TMCC, our foundation application is open January 1st to March 1st, and it takes 15 minutes to fill out. And it is for the following year. So if you fill it out in January of 2022, it would be for fall of 2022 that it would apply through spring of 2023. And then there's local and regional scholarships available. So credit unions that as a parent, if you belong to a credit union or grocery stores have scholarships, township offices, clubs. The Nevada Women's Fund has scholarships for young women. Rotary has scholarships, Elks Lodge, Lions Club, banks, labor unions. Some employers will have scholarships that they offer to their employees and their employees' children. So it doesn't hurt to ask if that's available to you. So in Nevada, we have some state scholarships, and you can see the website there for the Nevada Scholarship Database. And feel free to take a picture of that if you want to use it later. The Community Foundation of Northern Nevada has a ton of scholarships for students. I have personally seen students at TMCC get multiple scholarships just from that one foundation. The NV Energy Powerful Partners Scholarship is for Southern Nevada residents who are in Clark County. The Doyle Foundation. The Doyle Foundation is a pretty lucrative scholarship. They do have quite a few requirements, one of which is your SAR report from filling out the FAFSA. But I have seen students get multiple thousands of dollars from that one scholarship application. They require usually some receipts of what you spent towards school or you to show them how much it's going to cost you to go to school. And then there's national scholarships. So I see scholarships from McDonald's quite often, Coca-Cola, Burger King. There are scholarship sites where they'll have multiple scholarship opportunities. Most of those work based off of a profile that you fill in a bunch of data about yourself, and they match you with a list of scholarships that they believe you should apply for. One really good website like that is unigo.com. Scholarship America is a great scholarship resource, and College Board also has scholarships available to their students. So what happens next? What happens after you apply for grants and scholarships and work study? You will want to follow up on your FAFSA. So when you get that SAR report, it is going to tell you if you were selected for verification. What verification is just a way for your school to verify the information that you put on the FAFSA. So the government tells us and they tell you as a family that that verification needs to be done. The school then sends you typically an email to your student email address around February or March for most schools, and they will tell you what documents you need to submit. make sure that you submit those as soon as possible because they do typically take 4 to 6 weeks to process, depending on how big of a school you go to and what part of the season of processing they're in. With that, if you wait till the last minute, you're probably not going to get your financial aid package ready by the time school starts. For TMCC, our priority deadline to have your file complete is July 1st. So that means that all of your documents need to have been submitted and your FAFSA needed to have been submitted. All of that has to be done before July 1st in order for us to guarantee that you're going to have your financial aid on time. And most schools do have one of those, a priority deadline. And like I said, the purpose of verification is just to verify what was on the FAFSA. There are different types of verification. V1 is asking mostly about the income and household size. The V4 is going to be asking for proof of high school completion. And then V5 is going to be asking for both of those combined. One other thing that's very important when it comes to parent involvement with their student going to college is that there is a law called FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And with that law in place, that means that a school, a college cannot give the parent any information about the student without the student's permission. And so with that, we have what's called a third-party release that a student must sign up for before the parent can get any questions answered. Even if they come up to the counter and they want to turn in tax documents and they say, hey, is that all that I need to turn in? We can't tell you anything unless that is unless that third-party release is filled out, and that has to be done at any school because it is a federal law. So this is just a list of important dates and deadlines. The FAFSA opens for the following fall, October 1st. So if you haven't done that already, you should do it as soon as possible because it is already open. And some schools do offer first come, first served aid. So for example, the Silver State Opportunity Grant, that has limited funds. So the first students who filled out their FAFSA and enrolled into 15 credits are going to be the ones who get that financial aid there. So it really just depends on the school, how they award their aid, but a lot of schools do go on a first come, first served basis. The priority deadlines are different for each institution, but for us, if you're attending in fall, it's July 1st. If you're attending in spring, it's December 1st. And if you're attending summer, it's April 1st. With that, it's important to know if your senior is trying to go to college in the summer, you're going to want to talk to the school that they're going to find out if the summer is a trailer or if it is comes before the school year. So for us, it is a trailer. So it comes at the end of the school year, which means that those students who plan to attend TMCC the summer after their senior year would need to fill out 2 FAFSA applications. They would need to fill out the 21-22 FAFSA application as well as the 22-23 FAFSA application, and they would use 2019 and 2020 tax information for that. Disbursement, which just means getting your financial aid applied to your account, cannot happen any earlier than 10 days before the start of the semester if you're getting any federal aid. And most schools do have direct deposit available, and I highly recommend that you do sign up for that because you can get your financial aid faster, so it doesn't have to go through the mail. And then drop and withdraw dates are really important to pay attention to as well, because if you drop a class, it's going to have a different impact on your financial aid package than it will if you withdraw from a class. So you always want to talk to admissions and records about the different dates between those two, and talk to your financial aid office about the different changes in your aid that will happen depending on which one you go with. So I see that there's something in the chat here. Is Nevada Promise for UNR also, or community colleges only? So the Nevada Promise is only for community colleges. And you can also read all of the requirements for Nevada Promise and any of the frequently asked questions on the website for Nevada Promise through INSHE if you have more detailed questions, but it is a community college scholarship. Are there any more questions I can answer? Or anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to know about? Where and how to apply for Millennium Scholarship? Wonderful. So the Millennium Scholarship requires that the student gets a 3.25 GPA in high school, and then the Nevada Treasurer's Office will send the student a packet letting them know that they're eligible. It will have their Millennium Scholarship number. They have to take that number and register for it on the Nevada Treasurer's website. And then once they've registered on the Nevada Treasurer's website, the school will be notified that the student is eligible for the Millennium. All right. And that question was answered. So more on work study. So work study is not just for on-campus work. So for example, TMCC has an arrangement with Boys and Girls Club where students can use their work study to work at the Boys and Girls Club. So it's not only for on campus, but most of the jobs that are available for work study are going to be on campus. And most departments on campus will hire work study students. So depending on what the student's interest is, they can get a work study job in that department. So we've had students work in our counseling department. We've had students work in financial aid, which is how I got this job originally. And then there's people who work in admissions and records. So all over campus, there are work study students. When does the packet come out from the Nevada Treasurer for Millennium Scholarship? So that's going to be after the student graduates from high school. I've noticed that we start to get the packets usually around July. We start getting the notifications that the student has done that. If I'm a junior, can I apply for FAFSA, or do I have to wait till becoming a senior? So if you are a junior, it's not going to be helpful to fill out the FAFSA just because it will expire by the time you go to college. So you would need to you would want to wait until you are a senior, because it does have to be filled out every year after October 1st for every year that you're in college. Any additional questions? All right. Well, thank you all for joining me today. Do you know of any apps or websites that act to get into info out for multiple scholarships at once? So yes, there are quite a few like that. One scholarship that I would say, one website that I mentioned earlier, that gets you multiple applications at once, would be College Board. They have a scholarship profile that allows you to do that. Um, our RTMCC Foundation Scholarship, it applies you for hundreds of scholarships at once, just one application, and some students get multiple. There's all kinds of scholarship websites, honestly, and it's really hard to endorse any of them because I don't necessarily know the background behind how they use students' data, etc. So it's important to read the guidelines on how they use that information as well. Is there financial aid for dual enrolled students? So it depends on the dual enrollment program, but federal student aid is not applicable to students who are still in high school because one of the requirements is that you already have a high school diploma or GED. But I do know that, for example, we have our Jumpstart program, and students are awarded some aid to complete that program. If we've had a life change and the income is significantly different moving forward, how do we inform of that? So every school is going to have the ability to use professional judgment when it comes to income changes. So at TMCC, we have a specific coordinator that you would reach out to and let them know the change in your situation. And they would let you know if they think that you're going to be able to receive aid after finishing that professional judgment appeal. With that, it usually requires new income information, and they look at it and then they adjust your EFC based on your new information. And that applies to if you were married and you had two incomes during the 2020 tax season, but now you've been separated more than 6 months and you no longer have two incomes, that could be a reason. If you lost your job. And there are even special professional judgment applications that are for people impacted by COVID.